you're looking for some cozy spookiness, then you've come to the right place. Tonight we're reading a story called The Little Spooks of Miss Farley. And I actually have a little fluffy assistant here. His name is Felix. He's actually my parents' cat. I'm cat sitting this week, so you might see and or hear him during this story. He's quite a chatty cat. Also, would you agree that his little face looks like one of those suit sprites from Studio Ghibli movies? Because I think it does. Anyway, grab a drink, grab a snack, because this is going to be a long, cozy one. Moonfuls of faint blue light fell onto the floor through the sheer curtains. Every now and then, a gust of air rustled the silk and tickled the pictures hanging crisscross over the room. The breeze entered through a narrow, tilted window below the ceiling, the only one left open. There was no sound but the creaky ticking of some unseen clock, and no color but the pale blue glimmer of that enormous moon. Below the windows hung rows of potted flowers and herbs, sage, nettle, marigold, and more, which made the breeze gently fragrant as it swirled around the room. Dotted on one side of the space stood 3 small tables and over a dozen smaller chairs. They circled a bubbling kettle in the far right corner. Moving on toward the door, there was a spot reserved for Miss Farley's broom, currently empty, and a wooden coat rack near waist height. Each of the 12 brass hooks had a sticker above it, showing its own unique ghost. At this time, the ghosts were all varying shades of blue. Only later, under warmer light, would they reveal their true colors. Some, though, already showed a distinct pattern. Checkers, stripes, and polka dot were represented, among others. Moreover, each ghost was of a unique size and shape, clearly different from all the rest. Across from the coat rack, and anywhere the space allowed for it, storage cupboards reached from floor to ceiling. Heavy tomes, warm volumes, and leather-bound grimoires were skillfully crammed into the bookcases. Separated into small boxes, paper, pencils, pigments, and brushes filled the many shelves. Some paintings were left to dry on a metal rack against the wall. To the right of the coat hooks, in the coziest part of the room, velvety cushions lined the corner, and a corkboard hung from one of the walls. On the board, the same 12 ghosts from the earlier stickers. For now, they were grouped off to the side near the edge. In the middle of the corkboard was a cardboard cutout of a haunted castle. Finally, in the corner farthest from the entry door, Miss Farley had her desk. In front of it were the little bed of Mr. Bones and the much bigger circle of Susurrus. Miss Farley had already prepared for tonight's activity. Of all the activities planned throughout the year, this one required the most careful planning and consideration. 3 stacks of papers were neatly arranged upon her desktop. To go along with them, countless glass terrariums were lined up against the wall. This was in fact the same wall that held the creaky clock, pinned above a dark green chalkboard. The clock struck midnight, then 1 o'clock, 2, and quickly 3. The spiders suddenly stirred in their glass boxes before the door burst open. 12 little witches and wizards spilled into the room. On each of the 4 walls, silver sconces ignited and bounced warm, welcoming light onto the children below. A few candles also lit up on the shelves and nearby desks. Soon the space was filled with flowing robes in shades of black, burgundy, and indigo, wide-brimmed tall hats in those same colors, and the high-pitched, squeaky chatter of excited voices. Some tears had been shed, of course, but that all seemed forgotten as the witches and wizards moved around the room. Miss Farley closed the door after her last student and placed her broomstick in the corner beside, her hat on top. She slowly guided everyone toward the coat rack, where they put their cloaks and hats on their assigned hooks. Finn had the hook below the solid red ghost. Bree was the gold-striped ghost. Aiden was black and white checker, and so on. Neve had been given the pink and purple polka dot ghost, the same pattern as her toad from the year before. She had been quite adamant on this point. The little spooks were a lively bunch, even more so than the little ghouls in the next classroom over. Witch Farley took her time helping them put their cloaks and hats away, before leading them to the cushiony corner with the corkboard. "Good evening, everyone," she softly spoke. Under the glow of the overhead sconce, Miss Farley's long grey hair seemed to sparkle. She was a knowing witch, and always spoke in a kind, measured tone. "How wicked to see your little faces again," she continued. "Let's see which spooks we have in tonight." She turned to the scroll on her lap. With the feathery quill resting in her left hand, she called the first name. "Emmett?" From a fluffy pillow opposite the teacher, a boy got up and walked over to the corkboard. He grabbed a large emerald ghost from the bunch and put it in one of the windows of the cardboard castle. "Lovely, Emmett, thank you." She drew a crescent next to Emmett's name. "Caitlin?" Caitlin stepped forward and pinned her ivory ghost to the closest castle window. "Well done, Caitlin." Then it was Dee Dee's turn. She'd been nervously tapping her feet, waiting for her name to be called. Actually, her name was Deirdre, but only her mother ever called her that, and only in times of frustration. Somehow, Dee Dee suited the little witch better. "Either one is fine," Miss Farley reassured her. Dee Dee was floating her ghost back and forth between two windows, unable to decide. In the end, she settled on the colorful window in the middle of the castle. Witch Farley went through 7 more names until she reached the twins, Lucy and Sean. They liked being called on together. Sean wasn't there though, unfortunately. "He's sick," Lucy peeped on her way to the board. She took her silver speckled ghost to one of 2 remaining windows, leaving her brother's ghost off to the side. "I'm sorry to hear that," said Miss Farley. "Let's check in on him later." She gave the board a brisk tap of the wand. The cardboard castle quivered for a moment, and the 11 spooks placed upon it disappeared. All but one of the castle's windows were now illuminated, and so, with the scroll of attendance completed, the night could truly begin. The teacher asked Colin to wake Mr. Bones from his bed, which sat by her desk. Colin ran over, tossed aside the crocheted blanket, and took Mr. Bones over to the other children. While Lucy, Colin, and Niall took off his nightcap and tied his cloak, Miss Farley helped put on socks. Dressed and ready, Mr. Bones was propped up on a cushion in between the children. There was some pushing and pulling to decide who got to sit next to him. Meanwhile, Miss Farley moved her crystal ball from the shelf to a tiny table by her pupils. The little spooks nudged closer. "What shall Mr. Bones do tonight, you think?" asked Witch Farley in a whisper. She twirled her hand over the large lilac sphere, which began to sparkle from deep within. "Eat!" shouted Aiden. "Certainly," she replied, "but not right away. What else shall he do?" The children bent closer to where their eyes reflected the image growing inside of the crystal ball. There was Mr. Bones, first small and still, then taking up the entire ball and starting to come alive. He was waving a broom and shaking his pelvis. He skipped through the image from left to right, disappearing and reappearing every few seconds. "Dance around," guessed Darren, who had his nose pressed up against the globe. "Yes, Darren, wonderful. While the night is young, we shall sing and dance. And after," Miss Farley turned to Aidan, "we shall eat and rest." Aidan nodded in agreement. "What about closer to dawn? What shall Mr. Bones do before day breaks?" Her right hand joined her left in stirring the crystal ball. Both hands moved in swift circles, one going clockwise, the other counter. In a whirling purple fog, the scene of the dancing Mr. Bones vanished. A new vision soon emerged. At first, it looked like a dark, trembling cloud. As the image grew, however, the cloud shattered into a dozen pieces that spread across the crystal ball. The children held their breaths, waiting for the scattered flecks to stop shaking. "Spider," Finn uttered, barely loud enough to be understood. He could see 8 spindly legs unfold from one of the specks in the flickering image. The other specks followed shortly after, turning into their own wriggly spiders that slid across the crystal ball surface. In a swaying up and down motion, the spiders drifted closer and closer to each other, until together they made a continuous line through the middle of the ball. "Spider run," Bree said next. She spoke clearly, confidently. Everyone heard and looked up at their teacher. "Are we doing a spider run?" asked Bree. Her question wasn't to clarify the meaning of the vision. She knew what the vision meant, but to confirm that they would indeed be summoning familiars for the very first time. Witch Farley stirred the crystal ball another few seconds before nodding. She gave the stunned little witches and wizards a cheeky smile. "For the spider run," she added, speaking over their ecstatic cries, "for the spider run, you'll create your own picture of your familiar. But first, we start the night with Mr. Bones' song and dance." From a rune-inscribed chest underneath the window, Miss Farley grabbed child-sized twig brooms. The children formed a messy line in front of her, and each received their broomstick. After a flick of Witch Farley's wand, music came flooding into the classroom. It was a soft string piece that quickly turned more lively as a flute joined in. The teacher stood in front of her students with her full-sized heather broom and twirled around in time with the symphony. The little spooks followed her lead, gingerly moving their sticks from one hand to the other and spinning around at random. "Lucy, there's more space by Mr. Bones' bed. Aidan, you can stand in front of the cauldron. Don't get too close." Miss Farley was trying to spread out her pupils while she continued moving to the music. Moments ago, Aidan had nearly smacked Neve in the head with his broomstick. Darren, Finn, and Caitlin weren't doing any smacking. They'd placed themselves among the tables where they could swing freely over the tabletops. Along the edge of the circle of Susurrus danced Colin and Emmett, Niall and Lucy. The latter two did more talking than dancing, in fact. And all the way by the door, almost out of sight, were Bree and Dee Dee. The pair followed Miss Farley's instruction, but had their minds elsewhere, lost in that crystal ball vision of the spider run. For Bree, the thought of doing a spider run was wickedly exciting in a thrilling way. It would be her first shot at proving herself a proper witch. For Dee Dee, the run was wickedly exciting too, but in a scary way, to the point of making her tummy hurt. Spiders looked terrifying when they were small, let alone when they were as big as a house. For about an hour, pausing every so often, the little witches and wizards practiced their dance moves to classic tunes. Afterward, they ate, and then they lay down on the cushions for a nap. The school cat Vesper wandered into the classroom to have his own catnap by the warm cauldron. In the corner at her desk sat Witch Farley. She was holding a paper from the leftmost stack on her desktop. In her other hand, she was mindlessly twirling an empty glass vial. "Which one is supposed to be Falcus phalangioides?" Startled, Miss Farley looked up from the drawing. Bree was standing on her tippy toes in front of the oversized oak desk. She was peering at the 3 stacks of papers laid out in front of her. Miss Farley's eyes softened. She put the drawing back on its stack and leaned closer to the little witch. "I don't have that one tonight, I'm afraid. This one," she pointed to the paper stack to her left and Bree's right, "is Araneus diadematus, or cross spider. This one," she pointed to the middle, "is Eretagena atraca, or giant house spider. And this one," she pointed to her right and Bree's left, "is Sigilla exnotata, or sector spider. They're all wonderful common spiders," she added. "Which one would you like to color?" "Falcus phalangioides is common," Bree responded. "We have them in our cellar." With an amused smile, the teacher leaned back in her chair. "I'm sure you do," stated Miss Farley. She pondered for a moment before pulling open her desk drawer and lifting a blank piece of paper from it. "Can you draw one from memory?" Bree nodded eagerly. She snatched the paper from her teacher's hand and hurried over to one of the tables. From a tall storage cupboard, she started pulling boxes of multicolored pencils. While Bree scribbled away, her fellow spooks continued napping. In another half hour, they would awaken, pick their own favorite from one of 3 spider drawings, and color it in preparation for the spider run. As the children got to work, the school cat Vesper would leave his toasty spot by the cauldron for the teacher's lounge across the hall. By 6 o'clock, the little spooks and Witch Farley left school. Witch Farley was on her trusty heather steed, flying it close to the ground, and pulled along on an enchanted lead the much smaller twig brooms of her 11 pupils. Teacher and students weaved through the castle grounds, singing along the way. Beneath their swaying feet, the earth was richly cool and damp. It glistened in what remained of the pale blue moonlight. "Hold on to your broom tonight, through the night. Hold it tight, hold on to your broom tonight. Never let go." Their voices echoed through the slowly fading night. Witch Farley guided her students away from the school and into the rocky cliffside by the sea. In the distance, a crowd of witches and wizards awaited their arrival. They were parents and grandparents mainly, but some older siblings of the little spooks had also decided to join. Many in the crowd Witch Farley had met before, and if she hadn't, the relation to her students was quite easy to work out. Little witches and wizards, for the most part, took after one parent in appearance and the other in temperament. Studious Bree was a perfect illustration of this. She had the vibrant ginger hair of her beautiful mother and the quiet resolve of her somewhat stern-looking father. Mr. and Mrs. Quinn stood on a mossy patch of rock, next to a red-haired girl Miss Farley assumed to be Bree's sister. A bit higher up the cliff stood the parents and grandparents of Aiden. They were short, stout sorcerers who wore robes of the inkiest black and who hid their faces behind the brims of their enormous felt hats. Miss Farley had previously had the pleasure of speaking to the beard of Aiden's father, as well as the lighter, longer beard of Aiden's grandfather. They were both gruff but agreeable. On a large protruding rock above Aiden's family waited the mother of Dee Dee and the father of Neve. Dee Dee's mom, Miss Brooks, was a blonde squirrely witch with a broom that towered over anyone else's. Neve's father was tall and striking, cloaked in iridescent robes that twinkled as he moved. He whispered into Miss Brooks's ear as the children approached. The remaining families were scattered near the bottom of the cliffs, close to the shore. Meanwhile, the teacher had reached a spot that would become both the start and finish of the spider run. Swinging her legs to one side, she hopped off her hovering steed. The heels of her booties dug into the sandy shore. "Gather round, little spooks," Witch Farley called. "Come collect your drawings." No longer magically linked to the teacher, the children's broomsticks sunk to the ground. Bree, Darren, and Finn were first in line to collect their spider drawings. Dee Dee straggled all the way at the end, hoping hers had somehow been lost. From a deep pocket inside her cloak, Miss Farley procured the pictures. She'd been foresightful in putting Bree's spider on top. "Lovely work, Bree," the teacher complimented. "You captured the eyes and long legs very well." "8 legs and 8 eyes," Bree cheerfully exclaimed. Miss Farley nodded and handed Bree her drawing. She then guided the little witch to a spot along the starting line of the spider run. Bree bent through her knees to put her paper down on the sand. To Bree's right, Darren and Finn joined the line soon thereafter. They'd colored a cross spider and a giant house spider, respectively. Of the 3 spider choices Miss Farley had offered, the cross spider proved the most popular. Caitlin got one too, as did Niall and several others. One of just 2 sector spiders went to Neve. She'd filled the leaf mark on her spider's body with an impressive rainbow of colors. "This one will look dazzling," said Witch Farley while passing the drawing to Neve. Dee Dee was the last to receive her picture, a carelessly colored giant house spider in shades of black and gray. When her teacher handed it over, Dee Dee began to shake slightly. "It's all right," the teacher assured her. "Familiars are bound by magic, and we have the very best witches and wizards here." Miss Farley smiled, looked over at the waiting families, and then back at Neve. Still unsure, the little witch gave a faint nod before putting the drawing down. "Everyone, take 3 steps backwards," Miss Farley shouted down the starting line. She paced up and down, directing everyone to move backward. "Just a few steps. Take a couple of great big steps backward. Yes, marvelous!" She returned to Bree on one end of the line. "Since you have a different one," the teacher said. She lifted her hat and held it over Bree's drawing. From a strand of dragline silk, a long-legged spider emerged and lowered itself onto the paper. Bree trembled with excitement, but stayed in her spot, a few steps behind the drawing. Miss Farley put the hat back on and pulled her wand from her flowing burgundy robes. Swiftly tapping each picture apart from Bree's, she moved down the starting line. Every wand tap made 2 puffs of purple smoke appear, one here at the shore and one back in the little spooks' classroom. The teacher was transporting spiders from their glass terrariums in school to the drawings here on the shore. As each spider emerged from the smoke, its assigned witch or wizard leaned closer for a look. "In a few moments, I will begin the incantation," the teacher called out. "You will repeat the chant and step back at the same time." Dee Dee nervously glanced at her mom, high up on the cliff. "Here comes your familiar." The teacher was making sweeping circles in the air with her wand, and, in doing so, forming massive lavender clouds over the drawings. "Magna, Amica, Urania," she shouted. "Repeat after me, little spooks, and step back." Hesitantly, the little witches and wizards began mouthing the words they had practiced. Magna, Amica, Urania, Miss Farley repeated. Magna, Amica, Urania. Good work, Bree. Step back further, Colin. Magna, Amica, Urania. The longer Miss Farley invoked the incantation, the more voices joined in. Soon their combined cries drowned out the murmur of the waves rolling onto the shore. Mana, Amica, Urania, shouted Aidan. His giant house spider was about to do its name justice. From the swirling smoke it emerged, as tall as a cat, brown and hairy. It kept growing in time with Aidan's backward steps. Magna, Amica, Urania, chanted Bree. She was wide-eyed and focused, wishing with all her might. Unfolding its spindly legs one pair at a time, her cellar spider arose. Bree could feel her familiar's growing energy as she repeated the chant over and over again. Magna, Amica, Urania, stammered Dee Dee. She was walking back faster than needed, increasing the distance between her and her familiar. 11 impossibly large spiders ascended from the smoke. They quickly filled the entire shore, from the breaking waves on one side to the cliffside where the family stood. By far, Neve's familiar was the most striking. Her bold, brilliant sector spider bounced light in all directions. It cast sparkles in a full rainbow of colors. On the cliffs, some parents lowered their hats against the shimmering light. "Get ready," Witch Farley told her students. She was now rooted in place, her feet hidden beneath the sand. To contain such enormous creatures, she had to pull power from her entire form. Witch Farley felt the energy course through her veins, yet kept an inner calm. Like the air around her, her locks of long gray hair started to electrify and spark. Her burgundy robes billowed around her, at times obscuring her face. The onlooking families got to see the teacher for what they knew her to be, a fantastically formidable witch. 3, 2, 1, Witch Farley yelled. The start of the run, which had been an invisible line in the sand, suddenly lit up. The bright violet light reflected in the eyes of the gigantic spiders and spurred the creatures into motion. In a flurry of sand and children's drawings, the spiders crossed the starting line, setting off on their run. As each drawing floated back down, it evaporated into sparkles. The run took the spiders along the coast, then up the cliffs and into the hills. From there, it looped around the school and eventually made its way back down to the shore. Every year, the spider run ended in a chaotic rush toward the finish line. Miss Farley closed her eyes to venture into the spiders' minds. While the little spooks cheered and shrieked, the teacher kept their spiders on course. Bree's cellar spider reached the turn first. With long, seamless strides, it ran over the cliffside. After Bree came Finn. His giant house spider clambered up the rocks in a furious frenzy. A cluster of cross spiders followed, goaded on by Caitlin, Colin, Darren, and Emmett. When they made it to the cliffs, Aidan's house spider stomped over them on its way to the top. Miss Farley sensed this, so she swiftly moved minds. "Fair magic or no magic, Aidan?" she whispered into the creature. Aidan's familiar froze for several seconds until the cross spiders had passed. Back on the shore, Niall and Lucy lingered. Their familiars seemed engaged in a fight, though the teacher understood it to be play. Lucy's sector spider was lurching at Niall's cross spider, trying to pin the other's legs. Near this play fight, Neve's familiar also dawdled. It was twirling around, admiring its own sparkles. And even farther back, by the starting line, Dee Dee's giant house spider had barely advanced. Miss Farley's consciousness traveled through the spiders that remained by the seaside, and off they went. "Up here," she said softly. "Can you feel it climb with ease? That's your spell, your doing." Miss Farley was murmuring encouragement into the house spider's mind, into the mind of little witch Dee Dee. Standing next to her fellow pupils at the starting line, Dee Dee watched her spider scale the cliffside. It was as tall as she had feared, as terrifying as she remembered from her brother's run the year before. Yet it scurried with tremendous power. It reacted to her faint cries for it to move. Dee Dee looked over at her classmates who were squealing and cheering. Little by little, she raised her voice to match theirs. In the meantime, the front of the race entered the school grounds. Aiden's spider had taken the lead, and Breeze was about to slip from second place into third on account of Darren. At the last bend around the castle, Darren's familiar veered off course and through a courtyard, bypassing part of the run. "The long way is the only way," murmured Miss Farley in Darren's mind. Darren's familiar found the far side of the courtyard blocked by a huge web. The spider slammed into it, vibrating in place for half a minute or so. Behind the giant cobweb, the spiders of Caitlin, Colin, Emmett and Finn continued the proper course. Just a few leaps after them came Lucy. She had nearly caught up. So had Niall. At the tail end of the run were Dee Dee and Neve. By the time their spiders reached the castle, those in the lead were already tumbling back down onto the shore. Bree was cheering at the top of her lungs. Her falcus hit the sand first, but was struggling to untangle itself from other spiders that tripped over the cliffs. In a twisting mass of hair and legs, the familiars dug into the shore and tossed up sand until they finally disengaged. The starting line, now a finish line, was in sight. The spiders clambered out of the sandy pit they had dug to race toward the finish. Emmett's spider had toppled and was still trying to right itself. Lucy made it out of the hole and into the lead before Colin passed her. Aiden slid into first place, but so did Bree right after. Side by side, Bree's Falcus and Finn's Eretagina rushed toward the glowing line. They were joined by Caitlin's cross spider, which bumped into them from the right. Of the onlooking parents, some were clapping, others were mumbling their approval. None were as loud as the children themselves, who were jumping up and down by the finish, in the path of the giant spiders. Breeze was closest to the waves, Finn's in the middle, and Caitlin's on the side of the cliffs. In their mad dash, all three spiders were knocking into each other. A second from the finish line, they made their final leap over the heads of the little witches and wizards. It was Caitlin's drawing that came floating down first. Her spider hit the finish one leg ahead of the other two. Its massive form evaporated into 1,000 sparkles, leaving just Caitlin's drawing twirling in the breeze. Breeze and Finn's pictures drifted down a split second later. Aiden was fourth, Lucy and Niall jointly fifth, and Emmett sixth. Colin and Darren crossed the finish at a leisurely pace, since Dee Dee was far behind. Then the only spider left on the course was Neve's, which Farley discovered it weaving sparkly webs around the school. After some persuasive whispering into its mind, Miss Farley managed to coax the spider off the castle and over the finish line. The run now over, parents and siblings descended from the cliffs on their broomsticks. The teacher released the magic tantrum from her body meanwhile, though her hair still looked frizzy. Each of the little spooks had collected their drawing from the sandy beach. Back at school, the spiders, reduced to their normal size, stirred in their glass terrariums. Before daybreak, Miss Farley would release all of them into the castle grounds and the surrounding forest. But right now, she focused on discussing with families the outcome of the spider run. Bree was rather upset. She had wanted to win so badly. She had wanted to prove herself to her father and mother. It wasn't fair that she came in second. It wasn't fair that other spiders fell on her focus. Bree was beet red and crying. She was naming all the reasons the result was wrong. To ease the toddler's tantrum, the teacher drew a makeshift circle of susurrus in the sand. Within it, the little witch had her little meltdown, while her parents and teacher spoke. Witch Farley kindly glanced at the child every so often. She had seen these big feelings before, and they were an essential part of doing the run. There were various feelings, in fact, among the little witches and wizards. Neve was indifferent to the outcome of the run, yet sad over the loss of her sparkly spider. Aidan rolled around in the sand, pounding his little fists. And Dee Dee, surprisingly, seemed calm and content. She talked to her mother about her spider, about how tall and terrifying it was. In greater detail, she then described the different stages of the run, which led to that exciting finish. She had made it to the end. That was all Dee Dee could think of. When Miss Farley was done talking to the Quinns, the family departed. Bree's sister was flying on her own broom. Bree sat behind on her mother's broom, still sniffling. Next, the teacher chatted with Lucy and Sean's parents. They smiled proudly and ruffled Lucy's hair whenever the teacher mentioned her name. Their son was sick, as Lucy had said. On Friday, he should be fully recovered from his Fickwickle fever. Looking into her crystal ball, Witch Farley waved at Sean, who was sitting up in bed, and gave him some words of encouragement. More and more families left the shore once they'd discussed the events of the run. At last, Miss Farley shook the hand of Miss Brooks, who she hadn't met before, and complimented Dee Dee's perseverance. Neve's father stood off to the side, waiting. He would take off later with Miss Brooks and their children. The last family left just an hour before sunrise. Witch Farley did a thorough sweep of the shore, erasing from it any signs of what had transpired. She flew to the school and released each spider in a spot of its choosing. And as the first rays of sunshine hit the castle grounds, she kicked off from the courtyard, soaring homeward in the oncoming light. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this little spooky story, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. See you soon.